Play That Rock and Roll, where we take a look back at the albums and artists of the classic rock era. Today we will be discussing an 80s supergroup that was merged from two of the most iconic artists of the decade.
Some like it hot and some sweat when the heat is on.
This is the Power Station, an appropriately named band if there ever was one. Although they only produced 2 records and are really only known for 2 songs, this band is unfairly overlooked as its famous members overshadow its own legacy. But not today. Today we're going to discover what originally sparked the Power Station and also explore why it burned out so quickly. Hit it! See, this is great build-up. It's just a few seconds, but it's a fantastic way to get the listener pumped for the song itself. They do this on both singles, and I find it incredibly effective. So the origin of the Power Station is found where all great rock and roll begins. Duran Duran. Yeah, I'm not kidding. The Power Station is a quartet, and 2 of the members, Andy Taylor and John Taylor, no relation, were members of the 80s pop sensation Duran Duran. Now in 1984, the band had been working to the point of exhaustion, so they decided to go on their first ever open-ended vacation. In an effort to keep the creative juices flowing, while also producing an outlet for music that wouldn't necessarily fit in the pop mold of Duran Duran, the group split into 2 camps. Vocalist Simon Le Bon, keyboardist Nick Rhodes, and drummer Roger Taylor formed the alternative art rock group Arcadia, while Andy and John sought out drummer Tony Thompson for the beginning phases of what would become the Power Station. Their first project was recording a cover of T-Rex's Get It On, Bang a Gong with B.B. Buell, who was dating bassist John Taylor. Those 2 broke up shortly after, and the band realized it had potential supergroup status if they could just get the right vocalist, as Tony Thompson had previously drummed for Chic and David Bowie. In an effort to work with multiple vocalists they liked, while also preventing those vocalists from stealing the spotlight, they decided on producing an album with a so-called revolving door of singers, who would each record 1 track on the record. High-profile frontmen like Mick Jagger and Billy Idol were among those approached. Another one was Robert Palmer, a veteran solo artist with some 7 albums of varying genres under his belt by that point. Although prolific, Palmer had not enjoyed much chart success, as his only minor hit was this.
Doctor, doctor, give me the news. I got a bad case of loving you.
Some other interesting tracks in Palmer's early career include a strangely mellow cover of The Kinks' You Really Got Me, which was released the very same year Van Halen introduced themselves to the world by covering the same song.
Girl, you really got me now.
And by doing it much better, by the way. Palmer, however, did deliver a rather enjoyable cover of a song called You Are In My System by an obscure synth-pop group called The System. And here he is singing another cool song, Some Guys Have All the Luck, which was later made famous by Rod Stewart when he covered it.
Some guys have all the luck. Some guys get all the fun. Oh, I get to hear you talk, see you walk.
After being approached by John Taylor, Robert recorded a song he wrote with John called Communication. He then learned that they had previously recorded Bang a Gong with John's ex-girlfriend. Being a T-Rex fan himself, he asked to record that as well. The guys were so happy with this recording, they decided to abandon the multiple vocalist idea and move forward with just Palmer fronting the band. Now that they had a singer, all they needed was an original hit.
Just get yourself untied, yeah, now, are you gonna do it?
Yes, let's get out of here.
Some Like It Hot was a top 10 hit at the time, and it rocketed the supposed side project to A-list status.
Burning you up, ready or not. Some like it hot and some sweat when the heat is on. Some feel
This is a great song off a great album. It's an excellent mix of hard rock and dance pop. Those drums are so loud and powerful, they rival what Phil Collins and Alex Van Halen were doing at the time. They eventually released Palmer's original recording with the band, Communication, as the third single, but it didn't do as well as the previous two. I think they should have went with Murderous, because that is a jam.
She's a murderess, murderer. She likes to go for the jugular. Murderess.
Now that the band was a surprise success, their label pushed them for some promotional work, like interviews and this 1985 appearance on Saturday Night Live. God, they look ridiculous. I mean, Palmer looks decent, but those outfits on the Taylors are a big reminder that this is a Duran Duran side project. The inevitable question was whether this group was going to tour, which was a difficult subject as this band was meant as a side project for the Duran boys, and Palmer had spent the last decade as a solo artist.
The record does real well. Are you guys gonna tour?
Next.
Well, you know, we've been saying
This project seems to design us, really.
We seem to
We
be...
started off with, like I said, with one idea to do one song.
The decision was ultimately a yes, but without Robert Palmer. Palmer had apparently suffered an extremely acute case of LVS, lead vocalist syndrome. See, the Power Station released their debut album in spring of 1985, and then proceeded to help Palmer complete his latest solo record later that summer.
I nipped off with Bernard and the drummer from the Power Station, Tony Thompson, down to where I live, and started work on my record. And that's halfway through now.
This record delivered a #1 hit for Palmer with Addicted to Love.
Closer to the truth to say you can't get enough. You know you don't have to face it. You're addicted to love. You see the signs.
The video itself became a pop sensation with Palmer's all-female backing band imagery. This song, along with the fact that Duran Duran had briefly reunited to record a hit soundtrack number for the 1985 James Bond film A View to a Kill, meant that Palmer, Duran Duran, and the Power Station all had top 10 hits in 1985. Palmer decided his solo career was his first priority, so he pulled out of a scheduled tour for the Power Station at the last minute.
It was Robert Palmer, right?
Yeah.
He lives down in Nassau. I guess he didn't want to hit the road, right?
No, he was.
Well, he sort of
did hit the road, really, didn't
He was in the middle of an album that he started, and he had all his plans were to finish the album in time for the tour.
Hey, please. Come on. Sorry.
And and he's still working on it now. So.
But it's John Taylor's baby, so what he's up to these days, I don't know.
He took a lot of flack for this decision, but he shot back saying that the Power Station deal wasn't particularly lucrative, and he was more responsible for their success than they were for his. Although that sounds harsh, I don't disagree with him. The Power Station was originally a rather aimless side project fueled primarily by celebrity and an enormous amount of cocaine. Palmer's presence took a hard-partying vacation project and delivered a bona fide hit record. This was not a band that had been through tough times together, or even had known each other for all that long. I don't think Palmer really owed them his undying loyalty. Now without Palmer, John Taylor decided the band would go back to the revolving door of vocalists and find a replacement. They first approached Paul Young.
Every time you go away, you take a piece of me.
Oh, I'm glad that fell through. Paul Young would have turned the Power Station into Duran Duran Light. They eventually settled on Michael DeBar, a journeyman of sorts of smaller bands, whose only claim to fame is that he wrote the song Obsession, which later became a hit for Animotion.
You are an obsession. You're my obsession.
Animotion's classic version is much, much better. DeBar was also good friends with actor Don Johnson, who helped book the band on Miami Vice.
We came up with this idea that it would be great to have Get It On playing on in the background, and when we came up with that song for the show, I said, I know those guys. Why don't we get them in the scene?
Okay, I promise I'm not trying to shoehorn Miami Vice into this video. This was actually one of the band's highest profile TV appearances. Another was Live Aid, at which Don Johnson introduced them.
The power of the Power Station. She's a murderess, murderess.
Andy and John also reunited with Duran Duran at Live Aid, but then this happened. Yeesh. After that, the Power Station continued their tour and also contributed a song to the Commando soundtrack. Kinda lame. Anyway, the tour was relatively short, but still quite grueling. Remember, this was originally supposed to be a small side project for John and Andy to blow off some steam, not a new full-time job. So, needless to say, when the tour wrapped, the band split shortly thereafter. Andy and John returned to Duran Duran, but Andy would soon quit that band as well. Duran Duran recorded 2 more albums to close out the 80s. Meanwhile, Andy and John's old bandmate Robert Palmer released another hit record in 1988, cementing his status, alongside the likes of Duran Duran, as one of the most iconic artists of the decade. Simply irresistible. Now, the pop landscape of the 1990s was quite different from the previous decade, and it left very little room for either Duran or Palmer. So, in 1991, John Taylor reached out to Andy, Robert, and Tony, as well as their old manager Bernard Edwards, to see if there was any interest in a Power Station reunion. There was from all parties, but John backed right out again, as he was suspicious their label wanted to use the project to jumpstart Palmer's now faltering solo career. A more earnest effort to reunite the group was attempted in 1996, and again, all parties were interested. Unfortunately, John had to pull out yet again, this time to enter rehab, as years of hard living, as well as a painful divorce, had finally caught up to him. The rest of the band decided to push on without him, but tragedy struck immediately. Just after the reunion album had been recorded, producer Bernard Edwards died of pneumonia. The album is dedicated to his memory. Living in Fear was released in fall of 1996, and I'll just tell you flat out, I don't think it's very good. It sounds exactly as it is. Too little, too late. You can tell they were trying to sound contemporary, but it comes across like 3 old guys imitating a trend they don't quite understand. Sure, it's loud, but there is a difference between volume and power, and this just doesn't have any of the latter. Again, they decided to cover a classic song for the record. This time, it was a cover of Taxman by the Beatles. But that choice was ill-advised. I honestly don't know what they're trying to do on this. The project strikes me as a little weird. The time for a second Power Station album would have been immediately after the first, when they were all still A-listers, not 10 years later when they were in the back end of their careers. If you like the original Power Station record, I would still skip this one. There is better material in Duran Duran's catalog, in Robert Palmer's catalog, or even in Tony Thompson's Chic catalog. And I think they knew it too. After a short tour through some mid-level venues, the Power Station called it quits for good. Unfortunately, there will never be another Power Station reunion, as both Robert Palmer and Tony Thompson tragically died in 2003. Palmer from a heart attack and Thompson from kidney cancer. At that point, Andy and John had returned to Duran Duran, which is where John remains today, although Andy left for good in 2006. So what have we learned? Why is the Power Station important?
You and the Taylors, Andy and John, founded Power Station. Is that going to go on? Will it continue?
It seemed to me that the whole thing was such a spontaneous make-it-up-as-you-go-along thing that to try and do it twice would be a contrivance, you know.
To do it again would defeat the whole point.
The Power Station is a fascinating case of lightning in a bottle. The exact right people at the exact right time. And a short amount of time at that. This band formed, released a hit album, toured, and split all over the course of just 1 year, while they were all also working on other high-profile projects. The only real missed opportunity was Palmer not touring with them in 1985. That might have resulted in a killer live album. But again, I understand why he chose not to. Ultimately, the Power Station is not just a great 80s record, but also now a perfect way to introduce classic rock fans to three great acts not commonly associated with that genre. First, John and Andy's bass and guitar solos prove there is more to Duran Duran than hairspray and music videos. Second, Tony Thompson's drumming is out of this world. There's a reason Led Zeppelin chose him when they were contemplating a reunion. And finally, Robert Palmer is criminally underrated. The band's voice and stage presence are absolutely top tier, and he left quite a mark with those music videos. I've been to a couple of 80s costume parties, and the one outfit that always shows up is this one. Plus, there are a number of newer music videos that use these tropes as well. And that's the Power Station. Some like it hot, but me? I just like it. Join me next time, and we'll explore another 80s supergroup with some even bigger names.
Okay, Wedge, take out the Power Station.
Some like it hot and some sweat when the heat is on. Some feel the heat when it's hot and
Thank you.
I know you like them to be troublesome. Take it to the maximum. She's a murderess. Murderer. She likes to go for the jugular. Murderess. Murderer. That woman of yours is a killer.
I'm trying to listen to the new Robert Palmer tape, but Evelyn, my supposed fiancée, keeps buzzing in my ear.
I hate that job anyway. See why you just don't quit.
Because I want to fit in.
I was a highwayman.